Hey everybody, it's Doug Schau for 3 Max Oceanside at MakeMaineYourHome.com. In this week's episode of the Make Maine Your Home podcast, I'm going to talk about your relationship with your real estate broker. In the past episodes, I've talked about buying and selling, and I've shown this form off, but I was going to dive into a little more detail about what this form says, why we hand it out to everybody, and then and why it's good for you. So anyway, let's do this. All right, guys, I'm going to jump right into this. I took a class a few weeks ago, and the instructor said, hey, we should really be explaining this in this way and all that. And I've always had my way of explaining the form, but he really kind of opened my eyes as to how much we should go through this form with people. So I thought I'd, make a podcast today, go through the form, and then if you're seeing this for the first time, it'll kind of open your eyes on why we give this out and how our relationship works. So anyway, I'm going to, again, jump right in here, and I'm going to start. There's 2 sections to this. So maybe what I'll do is I'll fold it in half here so we can look at this section first. And then on this section, or this half, there's 2 sections here. And it talks about, right now, you're a customer. And in the eyes of the state, anybody that I'm not contracted with is considered a customer. Okay, and there's some rights there, and there's a way that we're supposed to interact and all that stuff. This form is required by state regulations that we give it to everybody we talk to. So if you've gone to an open house or anything like that, I'm sure all brokers are kind of hand this to you, or at least it's on the back of some maybe information sheets, or maybe somebody's explained it to you. If not, all brokers are supposed to be handing this out, and really they should be going through it as well. I try to sit down with everybody I meet and go through it in a little bit of detail. And with this video, I'll try to go through it in quite a bit of detail, and so you can understand what it's all about. So anyway, as a customer, it's interesting because you may or may not know this, but I'll talk about the few bullet points that are right here. It says you're going to get customer level services. Okay, so I have to, when I'm talking to a customer, I have to do some basic things. I have to disclose all material defects pertaining to the physical condition of the real estate that are known by the licensee. Okay, so if I know anything, obviously I gotta talk about it, all that kind of stuff. What I don't have to necessarily do is investigate it. Let's see, I need to treat both the buyer and seller honestly and knowingly, and not knowingly give false information. Okay, so I have to be honest. Makes sense, right? Be ethical. I mean, I don't know why that has to be on here, but hey, we should do that. We should be honest. That seems like a basic thing to do. Anyway, to account for all money and property received from or on behalf of the buyer or seller. Okay, so any like earnest money, all that kind of stuff. Now, I can write contracts and stuff like that on a customer level service, but it's really just filling out forms. You're kind of driving the train. There's no advising or anything like that. Okay, and then here's one: to comply with all state and federal laws related to the real estate brokerage activity. Obviously, we got to be lawful. We can't break the law, things like that. Okay? Let's see. Until you enter into a written brokerage agreement with the licensee for client level services, which is what we'll talk about in a minute, you are considered a customer, and the licensee may not act as your agent. So I'm not allowed to give you any kind of client level services. So as a customer, you should not expect the licensee to promote your best interest. So don't expect me to promote your best interest. That's kind of important to know. Or keep any information you give to me, the licensee, confidential, including your bargaining position. That's extremely important to know. Any broker you're talking to is not supposed to and may not act as your client, and that includes any information you give them is not confidential. including your bargaining position. So if you're off talking to, like, let's say a listing broker, and you just go to an open house and you start blabbing to them about how much you would or wouldn't pay or can afford or not afford, things like that, not confidential, instantly going back to their client because it's in their client's best interest. So your information is not confidential. Okay? So that's you are as a customer. So now, if you want, you can hire a broker, or ask a licensee, which would be like me, to enter into a written listing agreement or a buyer representation agreement. Okay, and then that is where you do get client level services. Okay, now there's a few more bullet points here under that section where you may become a client. All right, to perform the terms of a written agreement with skill and care. So I need to perform the terms of the written agreement with skill and care. To promote your best interest. Now, again, this is important because now that we're entered into an agreement, I am looking out for your best interest and I have to promote your best interest. So there's a couple bullet points under that. For seller clients, this means the agent will put the seller's interest first and negotiate the best price and terms for the seller. Okay? It's right here. That's what we're supposed to do by regulation and according to this form. For buyer clients, this means the agent will put the buyer's interest first and negotiate for the best prices and terms for the buyer. And, of course, there's one last bullet point. So, obviously, what they're saying is I need to look out for your best interest. I need to either sell your property for the highest price and the best terms, or get you the best price and the best terms when you're buying. Okay? Now, I need to also maintain the confidentiality and specific client information, including bargaining information. So, again, now that you're a client, everything's confidential unless you say I can divulge this information. Everything's confidential, and I'm looking out for your best interest. Okay? Now, when I sit down with clients, I explain this difference and how that works. I'm not sure if every broker does, but that's how I work. I try to explain the difference between that. So when you're a customer, I may not give you client level service. I may not look out for your best interest. Nothing's confidential. Really, I do have to disclose any material defects that I know. I don't necessarily have to go out and investigate anything, all that kind of stuff. So once we client up or go into a written agreement, then I'm looking out for your best interests. I am negotiating on your behalf. Everything's confidential, all that kind of stuff. Okay? Hopefully that makes sense. If you have any questions, of course, reach out to me. So on this half, this is where it talks a little bit about company policy, client level services, and a few things that you do need to know. Okay? So this first little section up here talks about what they call single agency, appointed agency, and disclosed dual agency. Okay? Single agency means the company and all its affiliate licensees represent you as a client. That means this is more for smaller, like little boutique type brokerages. It's not very common here in Southern Maine with these big brokerages down here like Remax, who I'm with, and some of the other agencies out there. But this means up north, it's very common if there's like a little mom and pop type agency. Every broker in that agency represents you. So if you say something to one person, they all know it. All the forms are, everybody can look at it. Nobody outside of the brokerage, of course, can look at it. It's still confidential in that regards. But everybody in the agency knows it and is working on your behalf. Okay? How I work and how a lot of people here in Southern Maine work is appointed agency. Okay, you're still hiring the agency, but then I'm your appointed broker, okay, or your appointed agent. And only I have your information, so I'm not sharing it. Even with the other brokers in my office, I'm not sharing that information unless they're also appointed. You can have multiple agents appointed, but it's not the whole agency, okay? Everything is confidential to me, all right, and the appointed agents. Now, disclosed dual agent. Company may offer limited agent level services as a disclosed dual agent. Now, this means that I represent both parties in the transaction, both seller and buyer in the transaction. Now, what I always tell people is the reason it's called disclosed dual agent is because before I even walk, like let's say I'm listing your property. before I even walk a buyer into that house that's my buyer client, I need to tell you about it. Hey, I'm showing the house. It's my buyer client. Okay, if we get to the point where they give an offer, then we'll talk about disclosed dual agency, all that kind of stuff, okay? Now, in certain situations, I'll kind of read this so you understand it. In certain situations, a licensee may act as an agent for and represent both the buyer and seller in the same transaction. It's called disclosed dual agency. The possibilities and consequences of dual agency representation must be explained to you by the licensee. Both the buyer and seller must consent to this type of representation in writing. Okay. Now, if anybody's uncomfortable in this situation, it's not like you have to consent or you have to say yes to it. You can say no. How I work, and I'm assuming most other brokers work like this, if one party is not okay with it, they don't feel comfortable, whatever, we can refer one of the parties out to, maybe somebody else in my brokerage. I can say, hey, work with so-and-so over here for just this transaction. If it doesn't work out, I'm coming back. I'm your client, that type of thing. That's kind of how disclosed dual agency works. All right. And let's see. And we got to remember, unless you enter into a written agreement for agency representation, a licensee is not allowed to represent you. Okay, not allowed to represent you unless if you come into a written agreement with me. Okay, so that's pretty much the end of the form. If you have any questions about it, let me know. Send me an email, put a comment down below. Give me a call. I'm happy to explain it more. Ideally, the way I work is when I meet somebody, yes, we're going to meet and maybe I'll show you a house or something like that. But at some point in time, we're going to sit down and go through this form so you understand it and then talk to you about the advantages or disadvantages of using a broker like myself. Hopefully this helps. Have a great day. And remember, if you're going to make Maine your home, you don't have to do it alone.